Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Brock Cannon is a Level 2 Wim Hof Method instructor, former professional cyclist, and mental health coach. After suffering from severe anxiety and suicidal thoughts in 2019, he found himself at the edge of a frozen river in northern Utah, and he plunged in. What he found through the immersion of cold water was more potent and effective than his prior 2 decades of therapy. Today, as a certified Level 2 Wim Hof Method instructor, he teaches people who struggle with mental health challenges, large corporation, and also gives back to the addiction recovery arena to help people realize that many of the answers to heal lie within. Brock is the owner of Prevail, a company that produces a lineup of high-quality CBD products. Prevail was made especially for active people who are tired of relying on Ibuprofen and other NSAIDs and want a more natural solution to their pain. Brock can be found plunging into the cold lakes in Northern Idaho each morning or hiking with his family in his spare time. He can also be found on Instagram at @IamBrockCannon. Brock Cannon, what an honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Hey, it's good to be here. Appreciate you having me on, Casey.
Absolutely. It's such an honor. It was really interesting diving into your story. And, I reached out initially and said I wanted to talk about cold water plunging and talk about breathing techniques, which we're definitely going to get into today and make a focus. But it seems like every time I looked into you, there was more to uncover. You mentioned nothing about the company that you own, the professional cycling back in the day. Like you've done a lot of things.
That means I'm getting old, nothing more.
Well, it beats the alternative, that's for sure. My first question is actually a clarification because it says that you were a cyclist first and then turned into a runner. And so clearly that's not correct. There has never in the history of cycling or running been a cyclist who converted the wrong way over to running. It's always the other way around. Everybody knows that. So just to clarify.
Oh man, it should be. Yeah, so I started racing in 1995 as a cross-country mountain bike racer. I was 15 years old and raced for 17, maybe 18 years. I'd have to do the math again.
Wow.
But yeah, there came a point where I started traveling a lot for work. I was doing some consulting at the time, and I was on the road 250 days a year. So after struggling for a year, and at the time I was still doing like ultra endurance mountain bike races, 24-hour solos and stuff like that, it just became incredibly obnoxious to be trying to rent bikes in every city that I was in all over the country. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to put on some running shoes because it's just not feasible on this one particular trip. I think I was like in Florida or something like that. And yeah, just started kind of running and found that for the time, I could get a little more bang for my buck. And then, of course, being a little bit of an extremist, I ended up getting into ultra running for the next few years. And yeah, so I definitely did it the wrong way. Definitely had the knee issues, like so many, and back issues and stuff like that. It's definitely a brutal sport. Of course, my CBD products were literally invented for my own pain, and now they've helped a lot of people. But I don't know. I don't necessarily recommend it that way. I think cycling is certainly a little easier on the knees and the body.
Well, definitely. It is interesting. And that is a fair excuse if you're traveling a lot. That logistically, that can be an absolute nightmare. But when I think about either jumping on my road bike or, going out on a walk, those are things that are so fast where even, living in the Salt Lake Valley, which you're from, and you know how amazing all the trail systems are around us, you still have to load everything up. And it takes a considerable amount of time to get out to some of these trails where if you leave your front door, you're basically on the trail already.
Yeah, 100%. And when I lived in Utah, I know that was always the case. To be able to ride from your front door is so nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. Definitely need to take more advantage of it than I do, though, getting out to the trails. I do want to hear what it was like to be in the cycling world in mountain biking at what I would consider the golden age of professional mountain bike racing. I mean, right around the year 2000, I feel like it really peaked out and was very exciting to watch.
Oh, yeah, man. It was so fun. And I'm incredibly grateful. And I think back on it every day. It really shaped who I am as a person today, shaped my youth, and it's kind of surreal now, kind of looking back, because I lined up at, nationals and even a handful of World Cups with a lot of the same guys that would go over to Europe and end up picking up road cycling and even race in the Tour de France. So it really was a special time. And, I remember one national, even up at Deer Valley, where I was getting ready and, all of a sudden, like the news started spreading through the expo that Lance had showed up and was going to, Trek gave him a mountain bike and he was going to pop into the pro race. And, I just look back and like, that was kind of crazy that I was rubbing shoulders with all these people.
Yeah, that's so crazy. I'm thinking like Cadell Evans, former Tour de France winner, came from a mountain bike background, and Lance would dabble every now and again. I think I actually remember that race as a spectator. Pretty amazing back then. And it's also fair to kind of explain, like, when we say professional mountain bike racer, we're not saying that like you were making a ton of money racing mountain bikes. Even back then, when the sport was kind of at its peak, like, explain what it was like to be a professional in mountain biking the sport.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, it's actually so similar to running if you think about it. So, like in running, you have kind of the dirt bag trail ultra runners who make really no money unless you're maybe the top 1% and you have sponsorships and contracts. But then on the road running side, there's professional road runners that make pretty good money sometimes. So no different in cycling. I think road tends to have more of the money, the big teams in Europe, and the mountain bike racers are more for the love of the sport typically. So yeah, like professional quote unquote is kind of a ridiculous term in many respects, because you work your ass off, you train hard, but at best you're maybe getting a little prize money at a race, and moreover you're holding down a job, and just grateful to have some sponsors to pay for your gear and your bike and some of those things. So
yeah, totally. Did you ever make it on any of the major mountain bike teams at the time?
I raced for what was called a farm team for Giant. So that was kind of the best gig that I had. I had that for 7 years and, got a brand new bike every year. So that was really nice.
That's great. And for the listener, to kind of explain the different disciplines, I think a lot of people think of mountain biking, they're thinking more like kind of downhill, but you're racing cross country. Can you explain what the formats of the races would be?
Yeah. So cross country, typically at ski resorts, there's more climbing involved, but it's a nice blend of up and down. So you've got to be versatile in both skills. But most of the cross country racers are pretty skinny. They're pretty lean. They favor the climber, but you've also got to have pretty awesome technical skills to be able to handle some of the downhills. You're on a little bit of a lighter bike. It's not kind of the motorcycle looking type downhill bike. It's much lighter and a little more rigid. So yeah, that's cross country.
Did you ever get seriously injured?
Worst I think I ever had was a broken collarbone. Thank goodness. So
yeah,
that was it. I still have a nice little weird bump on my bone today. That it could have been worse.
Yeah, totally. I think most cyclists have the collarbone done at some point. I still have the metal plate and 7 screws in mine. So just goes along with
totally.
it. It just goes along with it.
Yes, it does.
Well, so you switched over to running. Was it apparent very early on that you wanted to do ultras?
No, I didn't really even have any ambition to do anything with running. In fact, I still always look back and I kind of backed my way into it. I was labeling myself as, oh, I'm a cyclist, running sucks. I think I even had a water bottle holder that I would put on my bike bottle that said running sucks on it, on the bottle holder. So I was kind of anti. And then I started running more in the mountains, and, that led to being able to go longer and longer. And then I got to the point where, I was running 50, 60, 70 miles a week and trying to put in just even a full trail marathon on the weekends for training. And, obviously, as the more training you put in, the faster and more fit you get. And so, you start entering a few races and kind of went from there.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I have to say, before starting this podcast, I didn't really know all that much about ultra marathons. I knew it was bananas to try one, but didn't really know much about them. And at this point, we've interviewed several ultra marathoners, and it's really interesting to get to know the sport. In your own words, what makes ultra marathons, the events especially, so special?
There's such a tight-knit community in the ultra world. And to be completely honest, at the time of our recording here, I didn't really do anything last year. I kind of backed off had a new baby. So, being real and being honest with myself, goals and family of saying, you know what, I can't be training this much as I used to. And that's totally okay. I still just get out more for fitness and shorter runs. And once in a blue moon, I'll go for a long one nowadays. But yeah, like ultra, the community is so tight knit. They're very supportive of each other. And I think you find a common thread of having a lot of people from all walks of life. You've got people that have been recovering from addictions, and now this is kind of like their thing. And they often do really, really well. People that were used to pain in one regard can now take the pain physically. It's just a different type of pain. And I do think it can, I'm going to just talk about this because I think it is something that's not really talked about enough in the ultra community, is that sometimes people do become kind of addicted to it. You can become addicted to the race results. You can become addicted to that high, and sometimes push your body a little too much. I mean, I definitely think, if someone has the goal of running an ultra, or I say running, oftentimes you're walking, just to finish it. Like if you're doing a 100-mile race, you're most likely not running the whole thing. But yeah, it takes a toll on the body, most definitely. And I think unless you are aspiring to be at those top levels, you have to be really, really careful with having a delicate balance, because it can kind of take over.
Yeah, it seems
that's
like
just an honest answer.
No, I really appreciate that. It seems like the physical breakdown of the body would be one thing if you're doing too many of these, but also mentally, emotionally, if you're replacing one addiction with another, which I think is quite natural and don't have any problem with. But yeah, I could see how that could spiral and get out of control for somebody, almost like emotionally.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, and for some reason, I think I call it the ultra drop, because like you can do this event that you've trained so hard for so long, and it's this high, and you're out there with all these people, and you probably have half a dozen times during that race where you want to quit, and then you persevere on and you finish, and it's this unbelievable high. And then what happens as you start to recover is you go home and you sleep. Those hormones are just completely depleted. All the adrenaline's depleted. All of that stuff is just gone. And I have seen people get in a very scary place. Post-race depression is another term for it. And the only way sometimes people fix that is by then they sign up for the next one and they start training. But I experienced it a few times, and it wasn't until like some of the people closer to me in my life were like, "Hey, bro, you are just really grumpy lately. Like, are you just pissed off at life? You're not being very kind. You're agitated." And then finally, I realized like, wow, I must be really depleted here. So it's something you have to be very careful for. And, just like anything in life, there's kind of a middle ground, and, there can be the extremes, and then there can be that happy middle.
Yeah, sure. You had people reaching out and telling you were acting a little bit differently. Did you have any awareness of that happening within you?
I think I did a little bit, but I was also just frustrated that I knew something was off, but I didn't know exactly how. And then, it seems like common sense. Dude, you just ran, an 11-hour race. You're going to be pretty depleted. You threw up, all this stuff. But for some reason, I think I had this facade that like, hey, I'm invincible. I'm just going to keep training, business as usual. And then, people get honest with you.
Yeah, I just think when it's you yourself, you get so close to your own person that it's hard to identify those things while they're happening. And it's only in hindsight when everything blows up, like, yeah, of course I couldn't have redlined it that hard for that long. We mentioned, kind of some mental health issues. It seems like we mentioned in the intro, that peaked around 2019.
Yep.
What was going on specifically?
Well, I like to look back on my life and admit that I was the person that was running from my own pain for many, many years, or you could say riding away from my own pain for 17 or 18 years as a cyclist. And, it wasn't until a few years ago that I had some scares. I had some really dark thoughts. I had some suicidal thoughts that started entering in. Nothing was executed, but I was admitted overnight in a hospital when this whole thing happened. And thank goodness, like, got some help and, was able to realize that I had to actually start doing the work and not running from the pain that I've been running from. So I think that's pretty common for a lot of people, a lot of men particularly, because, we seem to be raised in a culture where it's better to suppress, you want to look tough, you want to act tough, and to portray any sign of weakness, even though the reality is it actually should be seen as a strength, that it's often labeled as a weakness, or at least men think that it is. It's our fathers and our grandfathers' generation. They went to war. If you say that you need help emotionally, you're a pussy. It's like, it shouldn't be the case. But that was the case for me. And, just realized I had literally been seeking the next high for the next race and all these other things for so many years. And then it all kind of came crashing down.
Wow.
Burned a lot of relationships, hurt a lot of people, and including myself. And so, it wasn't until 2019 that I had like a real wake up call after that night in the hospital, and really woke up saying, it's time to come face to face. And if I look back on my life, I could honestly say that was the hardest moment of my entire life. That was much harder than any ultra that I'd ever done or race or anything like that. So it takes a lot of courage, and anyone listening that has been in that situation where they had to kind of come face to face with their demons and their weaknesses knows that it's not easy.
Trying to deal with those issues of the past, trying to, deal with the pain that you hadn't dealt with before. What did that look like initially? How were you able to start that process?
I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. I know I took a year and just really tried to go inward. And the biggest thing for me was catching myself when I wanted to run from pain. Now, what does that look like? That could be as simple as you could be sitting in a coffee shop or in a restaurant by yourself, and a painful memory comes up, something that really would be categorized as traumatic or as trauma. And instead of wanting to say, oh, the hell with this thought, and eat or drink, or, we all do it in different ways. People smoke weed, they do whatever, grab a cigarette. Instead of seeking to run from that pain, I would force myself to just sit with it. And man, it was ugly. It was like the ugliest and most brutal time, because I would force myself to not run from it. And I don't think I'd ever cried more in my life than I did that year, just sitting with it and letting it pass. And I read this book, and I can't remember the name or title of it now. It was written by it was like a female monk, Pedra Padre, it'll come to me. But it was such a good book. And it talked about how there's a magic of sitting with your pain, and how you literally will get to this point where you feel like you're going to die when you're just sitting with this pain and allowing it to kind of flow through your very cells. But then all of a sudden you come out of this like black hole of darkness, and everything just opens up again. And then once you go through that a few times, you then get this internal confidence, knowing that, okay, I can sit with my pain. I'm not going to die. And I just already popped out the other end of this, and I'm a stronger person for it. And you kind of build this confidence back up. So I know that's kind of deep, but that was kind of what I was dealing with that year. I read a ton of books about the subject, and just really focused on implementing healthy habits and not running from pain. And also that involved catching myself when I was, wanting to go be an extremist again, and, and having to ask the question of, am I going for this 26-mile run in the mountains because I have to, or because I'm actually running from something to numb my pain?
Wow.
And, I think naturally I started running a little bit less and less, if I'm being honest, because I realized a lot of the motive was probably not the right motive.
Wow. Yeah, that is so important to really recognize that in ourselves. And you're right, that pain can be so intense that we would take anything to get that dopamine hit to, avoid the pain in the short term, but in the long term, it's still there and still is waiting for us.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't go away. Exactly right.
Wow. Wow. So how long would you say the process, obviously it's a continuum and it's something you're always working on, but when did you start to see noticeable improvements? Was that a few weeks, a few months? How long would you say it took?
I'd say it took close to a year. And obviously, like you just said, it's always an ongoing process of continuing to check yourself, because you don't build up 35 plus years of poor self-awareness habits and then have them go away immediately. So it's always a scrubbing process, I think. But within a year, I started to feel like a more healthy and centered person.
Mm. When did Wim Hof method kind of come into play? When did you discover that?
Wim Hof came into play a couple of years ago. So, that year 2019, I kind of struggled along. I still was doing ultras. I was trying to do the work, but it's funny now looking back today and 2022. It's like, whoa, I still was pretty far off even back then. But yeah, came into play a couple of years ago, and I didn't really know what the Wim Hof method was. I had heard of Wim Hof. I think I had seen like a YouTube video of him running on the ice caps or something like that years ago, maybe even close to a decade earlier, but I didn't really know anything about it. So that's when that kind of came into play.
And what things were you learning when you started to research him and his work?
Well, if I could give advice to anybody, it would be to, go through the process and to have some structure, because I didn't have that in the beginning. I literally was on a run one day, like you kind of said in the intro, and I was just having this crazy anxious day. And I remember, again, it was the result of me not dealing with some stuff in life, and it kind of just piled up that day. And normally I would kind of just say, all right, if I go for a run, I'm going to just kind of cool down. I'm going to feel a little bit better. But I was on this run. I was up by Park City, and I was out on this like beautiful country road, and there was a little river that kind of was going next to the road. And it was, maybe 20 degrees out, beautiful day, but I didn't feel beautiful inside. I was like chaotic inside. So all of a sudden I'm running along and I get this thought, jump into that river. It'll help you feel better. And I don't know where it came from, higher power, spirit, inspiration, whatever you want to call it. But I got to the end and was like stripped my clothes off, and I was like, I'm doing this. I had no training. I looked like an idiot. There was people heading out on the trail with their dogs. One guy pulled out his camera and starts filming me and laughing hysterically.
Wow.
I was like, he's like, I'm making sure you don't die. And I was like, okay. So I run in the river, I submerge myself, and I run straight out, just like a wild dog. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I got back in my car and I just felt completely clear. All the stuff that was rattling around in my head and the anxiety just disappeared. And I was like, wow, let me take notice of this, because this feels really good right now. My skin felt tingly. I felt energized. I just felt good. And for the next 7 days, I was in Utah visiting family. I went out to a different spot every day and just kind of kept cold plunging into rivers and lakes. And, I laugh now because I was like, I had no training. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to warm up properly, like all this stuff. And I just knew it felt good. So then my partner, Shannon at the time, who's still my partner today, was like, hey, maybe you should get some formal training. And she's like, have you heard of Wim Hof? She's like, you're obviously dedicated to this. Why don't you start training to be an instructor if you feel like this is really making a huge difference in your life? So sure enough, went through some initial courses and ended up in LA months later for the first module of instructor training, and then went from there.
Wow, that's amazing. I cannot believe you jumped in the river on just a whim, like your conscience telling you to do it. I would not listen to my conscience in that case, I don't think. It's amazing. We know so much about cold plunging now. that you didn't understand when you first got started. So I'm really curious, what was the training like? What was it like to go down to California and experience that?
It was awesome. I still felt like a novice. I had been doing cold therapy any way that I could, and I was living in Santa Barbara, so it wasn't far to travel geographically, but I showed up and there was 60 other people from all over the world that had showed up there to train. This was like right before COVID hit. So, looking back, I was like very grateful that I got to do the first one in person. And it was great. And I learned a lot, but there was still more. So because of COVID, our training was dragged out another full year. We had to do like practice workshops and a lot of other stuff and homework. And then we were supposed to go to Poland for our final instructor module, but because of COVID and travel restrictions, we ended up going to Colorado. So just outside Rocky Mountain National Park in February. It was plenty cold. I wasn't like bummed out that I couldn't go to Poland. Honestly, it was super beautiful, and made friendships that I'm still super bonded with, other guys, other instructors. And yeah, they just put us through some crazy stuff there. Like, in Poland, everyone is always like looking forward to this hike that Wim does with people, and he hikes them to the top of this ski resort out there, and it's supposedly always freezing. And we did our own hike, and honestly, the day we hiked in Colorado was like this fluke of a weather shift, and it had been like in the 20s all week, and then the day we did our hike, it was like 40 degrees and sunny. So it was kind of like not quite the test that we thought. But the days prior, they had us going into lakes in the middle of blizzards, and taking 10-minute plus lake plunges, and learning how to focus on our breath. Honestly, that long lake plunge wasn't even the hardest part. It was the hour before getting in the lake that they made us stand on the shore in our swimsuits with a blizzard of 30-mile-an-hour side winds and snow coming at us. And we had to just do what's called horse stance, which is like kind of this funny position that Wim's invented to like warm the body up. And man, that was like the coldest I've ever been in my life, for sure.
Wow.
So
That's crazy. So for the listener who's thinking you're absolutely bananas, maybe we should get into a little bit of the science and why this is so important, and what things cold plunging can help us with physically, but also mentally and emotionally.
Yeah. So, and the Wim Hof method consists of 3 components. So it's not just cold plunging. There's also some very special breathing techniques that are part of it. And then there's also a mindset component of the method. But, the cold exposure part is definitely the most recognized, I'd say. And with cold exposure itself, there's a tremendous amount of science. The way I look at every day, and one of the ways I motivate myself to get in the cold lake every morning, is I know I'm going to be getting an extremely good cardiovascular workout, is how I put it. And what happens when you go into the cold, and everybody I think can grasp this, because if you've ever been in a sauna, you get really hot. What happens to your veins? They start popping out. So you're getting vasodilation, and you can see the blood flowing and increasing. Well, when you get in the cold, the opposite happens. You get vasoconstriction. And so, your skin gets bright red. It might get even a little bit purple. And all of the blood is moving to your core organs to protect it, because they're the most important part of the body. And then once that blood starts to mix again, after you get out of the cold, it's just like flushing everything through your blood. And so that's why a lot of the studies now show that people that take cold showers every day rarely get sick. And one of the things they believe is because it's like cleansing the blood. It's increasing oxygen flow, and it's giving you this beautiful cardiovascular workout. It also is helping reduce inflammation. That's pretty well known. There's been athletes for decades that have been taking ice baths after hard workouts. Super good for inflammation. And then, I could go on about physical benefits, but then there's just a host of mental health benefits too. You are getting a release of up to 250% adrenaline dumped into your system within 60 seconds of taking a cold shower.
Wow.
Which is crazy. 250%. That's like what people see in blood tests for people that go bungee jumping for the first time. So, it's not pleasant initially, and you want to gradually work into the cold, but that's what's going on in your body when you're exposing yourself to the cold. For me personally, at the time I was like many Americans, I was a coffee addict. I was, those big Yeti mugs that are like 32 ounces, the stainless steel ones.
Totally.
I was drinking like 2 of those before noon every single day.
Wow.
And, that's just like, I look back, it's like, that was crazy, man. And it like wasn't even doing much. When I started taking cold showers, I was just feeling so much more alert that I dumped coffee completely. So, it's that much of an alertness tool. You feel energized, you feel clear, and it's awesome. So,
Wow, that's amazing. I'm thinking of one specific story. This comes from the book Wintering by Catherine May, where she talks about starting cold plunging in the winter. And she meets up with somebody who was diagnosed bipolar, and she had been through the ringer, this lady. They'd given her all kinds of different medications. They would hardly work. If they did, it would be only minimally or very temporarily. And she found through cold plunging, it was the one thing that made her feel normal. It didn't cure her disease, but it made her feel normal. As long as she kept up with it, she could operate just fine. And it was totally worth, a little bit of suffering to get into very cold water to be able to put up with that. And that's not, that's a specific story, but that's not the only story that I've heard about people with really difficult mental issues finding a lot of relief through cold plunging.
Yeah, it's unbelievable now. Even in the last few years since I started, the science and the case studies that are coming out, and more and more major universities doing studies on this. And, and nowadays, like, you can't really miss it. It's all over social media. It's kind of like Wim Hof's dream. He wants everybody to be able to feel happy, healthy, and strong through the most simplest of means. And, he's obviously not a very big fan of the pharmaceutical industry. And if anyone knows Wim's personal story, his wife committed suicide in 1995, jumped out of a 4-story building and left him with 4 kids after years and years of, in his words, being poisoned by the pharmaceutical industry, making her almost worse, with depression, bipolar, all sorts of things that she had going on. And so by the way, I'm not making out anybody to be wrong if they're on any type of pharmaceutical, because there's certainly times where it's 100% necessary and can save people from, committing suicide and going off the deep end. But he just doesn't believe in the long-term viability of it. And he thinks the cold, the breath, and, also would include getting out into nature can be almost as effective, if not more, in many cases.
And at least as an adjunct, maybe it doesn't cure everything, but it can at least help everything. It sure seems like that would be expected with something like this. Tell us how the component of breathing fits in with the cold.
Yeah, so there's several variations of Wim Hof breathing, and also for anyone interested in just breath work in general, I definitely highly recommend the book Breathe by James Nestor. Really good read, and it goes over all different types of breathwork modalities, and then has some exercises at the end of the book you can learn. But the breathing is like the Wim Hof breathing is a very quick and full style of breathing. You typically do 30 to 40 really deep breaths. You're going to be breathing in through the nose, gently exhaling out of the mouth. And then after those 30 to 40 breaths, you're going to let that breath out and just simply lay there and hold your breath. And in the beginning, you might not be able to hold your breath as long, but you can build up to where you can hold your breath for 1, 2, 3, 4+ minutes even, which is astounding. So essentially, you hold your breath, and then when you feel that need to breathe, you take one more deep breath in, and then you hold that for about 15 seconds, you let it all go, and then you start over. And typically, we encourage 3 to 4 rounds of the breathing, which might take, between 20 and 30 minutes a day. But you feel absolutely euphoric. You feel charged up, but yet calm, which I know that sounds like it doesn't make any sense, but people that have done the breathing, they always describe it that way. I feel charged up, but I feel calm. And it's just an incredible way to deal with stress, to deal with anxiety, to invoke creativity if you're an entrepreneur. You just feel awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely sounds worth the time. We were fortunate enough to host James Nestor on our show last year. And you're right. We can't recommend that book highly enough. He did such an amazing job investigating breathing and breath work. You mentioned nasal breathing, which I think is really important. Can you tell us why it's important to breathe through the nose and not necessarily through the mouth?
Yeah. And certainly tons more info on nasal breathing in James Nestor's book as well. But releasing nitric oxide is a big thing, and all the benefits that go along with that. They found that sleep apnea can literally be cured by implementing nasal breathing techniques, and asthma and all sorts of ailments can be literally annihilated by learning how to breathe through the nose more effectively. And so, people listening, whether you're an athlete or whether you snore at night, it's 100% worth doing this very easy trick of just taping your mouth shut. There's like special tapes you can buy and stuff like that are going to be maybe a little more gentle on the beard for the guys. But it's astounding, the data, and obviously the book Breath goes into that so much more of like what they found over time. But yeah, it's really, really cool. And for my running, I have always implemented nasal breathing, and I try primarily just to only breathe through my nose when I run. And I think it helps. It's essentially, even if you live at sea level, it's like giving yourself high altitude training.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm looking over at my bedside table and I can see my 3M Micropore tape that I put over my mouth every single day, and being really diligent about that now for, over a year after doing it kind of on and off. It makes a massive, massive difference. And you're right. There's so many different products out there that people can use, but just the simple act of taking a small strip of tape and just putting it over your lips at night makes such a huge difference in the way I sleep, the way I breathe, the way I feel the next day. I have so much more energy. It's a total game changer.
So awesome, man. Yeah, I love that you've unlocked that. It's so good.
Totally. I think my wife Bethany would wish I had it on during the day also, and not just during the night, but during the night definitely helps. And again, it's such a simple practice that makes such a big difference. I can't recommend that enough. Also, as we're talking about the breathing, tell us the importance of diaphragmatic breathing. I think a lot of people maybe understand that they should be breathing in and out through their nose, but they don't know how their chest should feel versus how their stomach should feel, or maybe they feel uncomfortable when the diaphragm, expands and it makes their stomach feel weird or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much on this, and I'll be honest with you, Casey. Like, I am not a science-minded guy. It was never my strength in school. I don't think I ever got better than like a C minus in science. And honestly, for my Wim Hof instructor courses, like that was the hardest part for me to pass, is remembering studies and science and all this stuff. But you don't need to be a scientist just to know that it works and to try it. Just like how most of us, we enjoy the benefits of electricity every day, but we can't explain all the intricate science of how it goes through the wires and everything and ends up in our house. But diaphragmatic breathing, I mean, to me, to just put it super simple, it makes you feel less stressed. It brings more oxygen into the body more efficiently. Your entire body is more relaxed when you breathe from the belly. Now, in the Wim Hof breathing, we breathe from the belly into the chest, and then we let it go. So it's belly, chest, let it go. And you kind of can visualize that as it's like a wave coming into shore. Belly, chest, letting go as it breaks. And it's gentle. It relieves stress. Most people operating at high levels of stress in the world, we're breathing, as you know, very shallow from our chest all the time. And it makes such a huge difference. for anyone that knows who Ben Greenfield is, he's one of my buddies up here. He just lives over in Spokane. He literally will he'll put a string around his belly. That's a loose string. And when he's a nut, he's a total biohacker, and he has every invention and gizmo and gadget on the planet for health. But he just ties a loose string around his belly, stands at his desk, and while he works, he has to expand his belly so that string is tight and doesn't fall off. And that's his trick that he uses to remember to breathe from the belly all day. And I think that's super cool. So easy too.
Are you sure the string isn't like Bluetooth enabled Wi-Fi connected to your whoop band? Like
that could be the next $1 million idea.
Absolutely. No, we love Ben Greenfield and we love his content. We're glad he's willing to deal with all the, the devices out there and sort out which ones work and which ones don't, so we don't have to, which is great.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So one thing I guess I didn't really realize, I knew with the Wim Hof method, there was the cold exposure. I knew there was the breathing, but I didn't really realize that there was a third big category, which is mindset. Can you explain a little bit about the Wim Hof method mindset portion of things?
Yeah. And sometimes they interchange the word mindset with commitment. And, they are very interchangeable, but also very linked together. So the best way to explain, the power of mindset is by just telling a quick story about Wim. So some people know this, some people don't, but Wim holds, I think it's 26 Guinness World Records for crazy stunts, many of which are in the cold. But one of his most notable was the world's longest quote unquote ice bath. Now, when we say ice bath, what they did was he was on national television. I feel like it was Japan, but I can't remember, so don't quote me on that. But he's on this show. He was put in this large glass case, and they just filled the damn thing with ice up to his neck. He had wires on. They were like, testing him and making sure that he was okay. And he stayed in for just shy of 2 hours, setting a world record. He gets out of the ice case after setting the record, and all these reporters start to talk to him, and they say, "What part of your body, Wim, was the coldest during the experience?" You can maybe take some guesses at what most people would imagine was the coldest part on his body. As a male, you could say it was his junk, you could say it was his fingers, his toes, whatever. But his answer kind of surprised some people. And he said, "It was my kidneys." And they're like, "Your kidneys?" Yeah. And he points, to his back, where his, kind of by his kidneys. And he's like, "It became very cold, very fast." He's talking in his Dutch accent. And they're like, "So what did you do?" And he's like, "I used the power of my mind to heat up my kidneys and melt the ice around my kidneys." And they did subsequent tests on him and literally found that he had the ability through his mind only to increase his core body temperature, which was thought to be scientifically impossible, yet he's doing it. So there's a component in the Wim Hof method that teaches mindset, and there's tons of little tips and tricks that you can do. A lot are around just the power of focus, where to place your hands when you're in cold water, which is a fun one. I'll just throw this out because it's literally one of the biggest game changers that I help people with. It's something that Wim taught to me, is when you get in an ice bath, when you get in a cold lake, cold river, whatever, you could even do this in a cold shower. Immediately when you get into the cold, you take your hands and you put them on your thighs, right next to your knees, right on your quads. And you just set them right there. You can put your fingers close together, and there's some magic about it to where it has this grounding effect. Some people also say they feel a little bit of heat released from their hands, and it just really helps people get through the ice bath. I can't tell you how many first timers I've helped through ice baths, and that was the one thing they're like, "Oh my gosh, that really helps me." So just things like that, where the power of your mind, you can visualize flames coming out of your hands like the Tumo monks do, and there's all these little mindset tricks. So it's not super focused on, publicly, but it is part of the Wim Hof method.
Wow, that's so interesting. I've never heard that. Does that kind of pitch your upper body forward if you're placing your hands on your thighs like that?
Um, Obviously, it just kind of depends on the ice bath that you're sitting in, or like it's not always feasible for me in a lake, or if you're like in the ocean, for example, you've got to kind of maintain your balance, and that can throw you off. So, I always say if you can safely put your hands on your thighs first and foremost. If you're on a little more of an unstable surface, I put my hands like prayer hands to my heart, and I push my hands together pretty firmly. That's the number two that I would go to.
Gotcha. And somebody that doesn't have access to a cold lake or the ocean, you mentioned several times a shower is okay. Is there anything to consider the difference between a shower versus just a cold plunge in a lake?
Yeah, everybody has a different opinion. I mean, I love cold showers because I think they're doable for 90% of people. Everybody's pretty much got one in the developed world. And in most places, unless maybe you're living in Florida or somewhere super warm, sometimes parts of Southern California, the water's going to be cold enough to still give you the benefits. So what is that temperature that gives you the benefits? Well, the science shows that it can be as high as 60 degrees or lower to give you the benefits. Here's the crazy part. When like the science has shown like what's the optimal temperature for cold exposure to get all the benefits, they showed no difference between water that was 34 degrees and really, really chilly versus water that was 55 degrees. No difference in the benefits. So, why get in like the actual ice? I don't know. Maybe it's, it looks cool, but like in terms of like the actual benefits physiologically, the water just has to be 60 degrees or colder. And
Wow.
that's very doable for most people.
Wow.
And they can start with 15 to 30 seconds in the shower, even after they've taken their warm shower. And then you gradually increase it and the body will adapt.
That's great. That's something you mentioned a few times, which I think is so important. If we look at somebody like Wim Hof or somebody like you who's done this for a while, we might think like, oh, there's no way I could ever do that. I could never hold my breath for a few minutes. I can never get into a lake that cold. But you're right. You adapt. You grow and you learn, and you've got to start with where you are. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but you'll be able to push that discomfort out further and further the more you do it.
100%. Yep.
That's awesome. I do want to talk a little bit about the story of your company, Prevail. Can you tell us what was going on that made you start to think about creating your own products?
Yeah, well, like I alluded to just a little bit, I was just getting into ultra running. I was beating the crap out of my body. It was a rude awakening after cycling for many years. It was muscles that I hadn't ever worked. And I think it was the summer of 2016. I was still living in Salt Lake at the time, and I got this bright idea to quote unquote run all of the major peaks in the Wasatch Front. So I was like trying to do almost a peak a day, and some of them would take me just a couple of hours to I say run, but some of these are so steep, as Casey, you're hiking. But I'd always try to kind of run down. And after a few weeks of hitting off all these peaks on my bucket list, my body was just in agony. And, the way I grew up, my mom's dad, my grandfather was a traditional physician. So we were just trained to pop an ibuprofen. And that was what my mom did when I had, bumps and bruises as a kid. And in my teenage years as a mountain bike racer, pop some ibuprofen, feel better. And it got so bad that I was taking 12 200 milligram pills per day.
Wow.
And still really not even feeling that much better. Knees were always swollen, a lot of aches and pains. And I was just like, there's got to be a better way. So I started looking into all these different botanicals. Of course, there's things like arnica and calendulum, which are awesome and can help relieve some stuff. But, then I was like, what about cannabis? Started microdosing cannabis. I was a medical marijuana card holder in California legally, and I would take a little edible at night, and that helped. But then I was like, well, the masses aren't really in a position to take this, and there's licensing issues. So I don't know if I want to go that route. Then I tried CBD, and honestly didn't feel anything. I was like, what's all the hype around CBD? This was in 2017, 2018. still kind of coming on the scene in popularity. And I was like, well, everyone's saying that it should work. Maybe it's just not potent enough. So I partnered with a lab out of the Denver, Colorado area who really knew what they were doing, some good guys. And I was like, what if we could create a salve that could just be rubbed on the muscles that was like triple the amount of most of the CBD salves out there, full spectrum, pure, organic, really potent. And then let's put all these other, botanicals, arnica and calendula flowers and all these other things in it. And tried it a couple times, still wasn't potent enough. I still wasn't getting the relief, kept, adding more CBD to it. And then finally we got it. And it was just like working. I was like, wow, I wonder, well, if this works for me, will it work for other runners? Started marketing it to, the running community, and it just took off. And wow. Still today we have a really, really, really loyal following. And of course there's a lot of CBD products out there now, but for runners, we've seemed to find something that really works.
So I am not familiar at all with some of those other ingredients you mentioned. I'm able to pronounce arnica. I don't know that I'm able to pronounce the other one that you said even. Can you tell us how do those work as an adjunct?
Well, we have a list of our ingredients on prevailbotanicals.com, for anyone that does want to take a peek at the salve. There's zero pressure, but if you want to look at what we have in there, there's all sorts of stuff. But yeah, there's these medicinals have been around for centuries. And in fact, arnica in and of itself is a really effective anti-inflammatory and pain reliever. I think my wife's got arnica pills in the house, actually. So they're all really, really powerful in and of themselves. But then when we've kind of blended all these things together, it's just even better. We put lavender essential oil in there as well for kind of just a soothing, calm effect. There's so much magic with essential oils and all that stuff. So yeah, kind of just found the perfect blend of it all.
Wow, that's great. Maybe you could give us a high-level view of what the difference is between THC and CBD, because I think even at this point, there's a lot of confusion and people don't know the difference between the two.
Yeah, always is confusion for sure. So THC is the ingredient in cannabis or marijuana that gives you the high, to put it simply. It's what makes you feel high, gives that euphoric effect. There is no THC, or I should say, to be technically correct, very, very little THC in hemp. Hemp is kind of the cousin of the cannabis plant. It looks very similar, but the way it's been bred and come up over centuries, it doesn't have the amounts of THC in it. But what it does have in it is high amounts of CBD, which stands for cannabidiol. And cannabidiol, it proves to be a very, very powerful anti-inflammatory. And, there's two ways you can kind of use it. It's used internally, when you see CBD oils, people taking tinctures, that works internally. It's been shown to really help with anxiety, depression. People report better sleep. And then, externally, you can use it like a salve or a lotion and rub on sore muscles. It helps that way as well. So the benefit to CBD products versus THC-based products is, number one, it's not legal in every state. THC is not legal in every state, or you have to have a medical card in a lot of states to get it. And number two, you don't have to worry about feeling high if you're, a working professional or a parent, and you don't want to feel loopy during the day. You just want to have some pain relief. CBD is a really good option.
That's great. Thank you for that explanation. What was it like for you to create a product initially just for you that then was able to benefit, friends, family, and now, as a product that you are selling to all kinds of different people?
It was awesome. I mean, really rewarding. I kind of look back just in awe sometimes, because I would have been completely happy if I just kind of made something for myself. But, I think that's how so many businesses and ideas are born in the world. It's just somebody trying to solve a problem, and then it ends up that it helps a lot of other people as well. It's pretty cool.
That's great. I would be super proud of that if I were you. In bike racing and a lot of other endeavors in life, we get graded, we have rankings. There is a first place, a second place, and a third place. And it's pretty easy to see how you stack up with other people doing the same thing that you do. And so my question for you now is, based on what your definition of success was before, how has that evolved over time, and how do you define success now?
That's an awesome question. And one I think everyone should ponder. That's a great question, Casey. I would say success to me now is being able to detach from all of the labels that I used to have about myself and still be happy. Being happy just because I am who I am. Just I'm Brock. Like, this is me, and I'm not just this body. I'm not just this flesh. I'm a soul, and that might sound a little esoteric or weird, but that's how I view it. And I think there's one of the things I do in my coaching and with like my clients now, which is a lot of men, is just helping them detach from those labels. And once they do, they find that they're so completely free. And like the stress and the buildup that we give ourselves to, like, as like in cycling, especially if you win a race, it's like you feel this pressure to keep having to be number one or being in the top 10 or, who am I? Oh, I'm a cyclist. I'm an ultra runner. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm this, I'm that. When yes, in theory, we might be all those things, but who are we, and can we be happy when that's taken away? There was one of my ambassadors, he's the best guy, like such a cheerleader for our brand. And he had this come up. He was like running ultras, losing all this weight, guy in his late 40s, super stoked that he found the sport. And then boom, one day he gets injured. Doctor says he can't run for 3 months, spins into a deep, deep depression. And I was getting on the phone with this guy just to try to help him, because he was writing these like sob story Facebook posts, like my life's over. I'm like, dude, you're more than you're, ultra running. And, like, take that away. Who are you? And once someone can figure that out, to me, that's success.
I love that. What a great definition and a great answer to the question. I really appreciate that a lot. Tell us about your coaching business and how you work with people today.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of people that have mental health challenges like myself. And, I don't think it's something that you ever just say, oh, I'm cured, it's gone. There's just the world we live in today. It's tough to escape anxiety sometimes. It's tough to escape stress and moments of depression. And so I work with people in person. I do different retreats. I do different events. Group coaching. So there's some group camaraderie and accountability, but just really diving into some of these modalities, more techniques, helping people get back to the breath and helping them realize that if they want, and some people still will choose to take a pill or a medication, if they want to try something in addition to that, or as maybe something eventually that they replace it, there's options. So just providing options for people with mental health challenges and, helping them feel successful and free. Like I just said, that's the definition of success to me, is just being happy every day.
Yeah, that sounds very helpful and very practical. This has been such an awesome conversation. I certainly have learned a lot. Can you tell the listener one simple tip that you would like to leave with them that they could take and apply in their lives?
Yeah, get in the habit every time you feel tense or stressed of tricking your mind by doing 10 deep breaths. I do that little trick to myself all the time. And the reason it's 10, and listen, if 10's too hard, trick your brain into just doing 5. But if you can say, you know what, I'm just going to do 10 deep breaths right now, you always feel better, and you can do it anywhere. There's no restrictions on it, and you feel awesome.
I love that. Until they start charging us for air, which I wouldn't be surprised with at some point. Good one to take advantage of.
100%. Yeah.
Oh, man. Brock Cannon, this has been an awesome conversation. Where would you like people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, anywhere online is great. I'm on Facebook, Instagram's easy. I'm even on TikTok now, which is more recent. I'm trying to figure that one out like kids. But yeah, hit me up, send me a message. I'd love to connect with anybody.
That's great. We will link to all of that in the show notes. If you figure out TikTok, let me know, because I haven't touched it yet. And I don't really plan to, because it seems out of my league. So best of luck with that. Brock Cannon, thank you so very much for everything that you've learned in life, for all the difficulties and struggles and suffering that you went through, to come out on the other side with a different perspective and to want to share that message with other people and to create really high quality products. I just think is so super cool. So thank you so very much for everything that you do. And thank you so much for being on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Casey. It's been an honor.
It's been an honor to host you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. As always, thank you so very much for listening to Boundless Body Radio. It's really inspiring and amazing to see some of the reviews that we have been getting, and also to receive so many messages and emails about how these episodes have improved our listeners' lives. And so thank you so very much. We are so happy to bring these episodes to you and provide them for free. And we really hope that they help you in your life. We have just passed 2 major milestones, which is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And basically, we did both of these in pretty much the exact same day. We have just passed 100,000 downloads worldwide of Boundless Body Radio, and we have just launched our 250th episode, which is absolutely amazing. Like I said, I never imagined we could reach that many people. We always want to keep you updated on things that we're doing on our website. So if you go to myboundlessbody.com, you can always see what we're up to. This month, we have a link that you can go and schedule a functional movement screen, which we do virtually over Zoom. A functional movement screen is a series of 7 different movements and 3 different clearing tests, which is designed to find weak links in the body, such as muscle imbalances and joint stability issues. It's a really great tool for discovering inefficient movement, and even if you're not experiencing pain in certain areas of your body, it's something that can prevent injury later on. Some muscles need to be stretched, some need to be strengthened, and we can help you create a plan around that so that you can stay healthy and continue to move well for the rest of your life. So again, you can go and schedule that at myboundlessbody.com. You will also see the other services that we offer. You can always schedule a complimentary 30-minute consultation with us to really chat about anything that you like. And remember, if you are enjoying Boundless Body Radio, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on Apple. It really helps get this passion project out to other people. And thank you again for tuning into Boundless Body Radio.